What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome back for some more Fire Emblem Heroes, and in this video, I'm gonna be taking a look at the new weapon refines that we have got in this patch for Clarisse, Myrrh, Draug, and Donnel, and I'm also gonna be giving you guys builds for these new weapon refines. The timestamps can be found on the seek bar as well as in the description, so with that said, let us begin. Clarisse was always known as the worst archer in the game pretty much because shortly after release, Fallen Takumi was released who had a better stat spread and a preferred weapon, and then all of the other archers made it worse for her. But Clarisse with this weapon refine bounces back as a really good unit, and this weapon refine makes her way more viable and a really fun unit to use. So Sniper's Bow has got attack speed, smoke built into it, and also dual phase splash damage, so that is really great. And the weapon refine is a conditional effect which is pretty easy to fulfill actually, so if she has got above half health and if she's within 2 spaces of her support partner, then it gives her plus 4 speed and plus 4 attack during the combat in both phases, and she also gets a conditional fire sweep effect. So this makes Clarisse into a very good utility and support unit. Not only she can get extra stats in attack and speed, which is much needed on a unit like her, but she can also apply debuffs, splash damage really safely with this kind of conditional fire sweep effect. And this condition is really easy to trigger because she does have the conditional fire sweep effect, so she's not going to take any kind of damage in the retaliation, so she can maintain the HP condition, and you can just make any kind of vantage sweeper like Chronia or any kind of dagger unit as a support partner, especially because they can debuff defense and resistance while Clarisse can debuff attack and speed. And you can also ally support her with a dancer if you just want to clear maps with Clarisse and her passive damage, or even in Arena Assault where she can be really useful for just chipping away the health of these whale units. So Clarisse is a pretty good unit now with good utility, which means that even at low merges she can be utilized, as I said, in something like Arena Assault, and that is really great. As for her builds, these are just some of the budget builds that you could run. Poison Strike is a great slot B skill that she's already got, so it's a cheap one. You can run Double Savage Blow for the max splash damage combined with her weapon, and Life and Death, Darting Blow, Swift Sparrow are all great options for budget builds that you could run. Life and Death is especially really great because she's got the conditional fire sweep effect, so she doesn't care that you're reducing her defense and resistance. And these kind of builds can be easily used in something like Arena Assault, as I said, for just chipping away the health of the whale units and eventually taking them out. You could also run some expensive builds on her if you're really dedicated to her. So Life and Death 4 once again is a really good option, and because she can get really fast, she can also run Null Follow Up to just double through Weary Fighter and those kinds of units who prevent the follow-up attacks. And you can also run a Life and Death Special Spiral build with an AoE special for a lot of AoE damage, which she can already do. So with this build, you're able to spam Blazing Wind, and Life and Death is required because AoE specials calculate the damage based on your visible attack stat. You could also run a build like this with Flashing Blade 4 in slot 8 to give her true damage, and Loud Speed Defense is also a expensive slot B option that she has got, and with this build she can just trigger Glimmer on her second hit and she can get pretty fast, so Flashing Blade 4 is a pretty good option for her. Myrrh has got a really great weapon refine, probably one of the best if not the best from this patch I would say. So this is a super good weapon refine that improves her original effect. So basically, if she's got one more defense than the foe cannot make a follow-up attack, which is absolutely amazing. And the weapon refinery gives her plus 5 to all of her stats if she's above 25 HP, which is really easy to do, and if she's within 2 spaces of an ally, once again, which is really easy to do as well. So she's just able to get plus 5 to all of her stats with that, and she also has a half null follow-up effect built into it. Now it has only got a part of null follow-up, and that is really useful for Myrrh because it can basically save her from doubles from high defense fast units who have got auto double weapons or bold fighter. So this makes her pretty strong as a tank, but keep in mind she's still weak to foes with null follow-up, so you definitely have to watch out for those kinds of enemies. And she can prevent doubles from fast foes pretty easily because they're not really going to be having that much defense. And against high defense foes, most of the time Myrrh is going to be faster because she also gets plus 5 speed from her weapons effect, so that is great. So overall, this is a very solid weapon for a flying tank. Now keep in mind she's a dragon unit and also a flying unit, so you have to run something like Iot Shield to cover her from the archer weakness, and the dragon weakness is going to be there unless you use someone like Spring Eden, I guess. So that is going to be problematic, but still she is going to be a very powerful flying tank nonetheless. She does come with Fury, but Fury I would say is not really a good budget skill for Myrrh, not only because of her HP's condition that she's got in her weapon refine, but also the fact that tanks like her don't really appreciate the recoil damage from stuff like Fury. So for a budget build, you could easily run Fortress Defense and have Quick Riposte. As it is, the attack loss is made up by the fact that she can get extra attack from her weapon refine, and her breath already gives her +3 attack, so this isn't the biggest deal. And if you have something like plus attack Ivy, then this is even better. And as I said, Iode Shield Sacred Seal is really good to protect her from those archers. So you could run a 2-turn cooldown special like Noontime, which you can trigger any single combat, or you could just run something like Bonfire, which can make use of her high defense. You could also run HP Defense 2 and Slade, which you could get from Marissa as a budget option, so it does increase her bulk with that extra HP and also provides her with a bit more defense. And if you run her on a Fire Emblem team, then you could easily provide her with the Fortify Flyers buff, because keep in mind that Great Flame's effect does work on the visible defense stat, so you need to increase her visible defense stat to make sure that she can trigger her weapon's effect against most foes. The third build is another budget build, and here you don't really need to increase your defense if you've got something like a plus defense IV, which is really good. So you could just run Sturdy Stance and have that kind of build with a Bonfire. And now we move on to more expensive builds. So of course this is going to be the ultimate Myrrh build with Distant Counter, Quick Riposte, makes full use of her bulk, and this is definitely a build to go for if you're a big Myrrh fan and if you have her with high merges or even at +10 merge. You could also make her into a melee specialist with Fortress Defense Res. This does increase her visible defense, so that is of course really good, and this can be increased even further with Defense Tactic or Fortify Flyers. And finally, you could use her in Ether Raid's offense in the light season. Don't use her in Astra season because Big Bad Thrasier is there with her Dragon Effective weapon, so light season is definitely the most cozy one for Myrrh because she can get defense and resistance both from air and Mila, and basically function as a pretty great tank because she is able to prevent the doubles from the foes, and something like Noontime can be pretty nice for self-sufficiency. Donnel is a really popular character that a lot of people have plussed and merged, and he's a really popular unit that a lot of people build for a good reason because Lance Infantry units are pretty rare, and Donnel is one of the better aged Gen 1 units because of the trainee BST which he had when the game came out. However, his weapon refine isn't really the best. It's a decent weapon refine that gives him 11 Might Brave weapon. It also has a mini sturdy impact built into it, and that is pretty powerful in the player phase, but the problem is that a lot of times Donnel is not used just in player phase. He's used as a mixed tank and many times a straight up enemy phase tank, so this is definitely a weapon refine which a lot of Donnel fans are really not going to be liking because that's not how Donnel is usually used, which is strictly in the player phase. He's really not used like that. So for a lot of those people, this is going to be a pretty disappointing weapon refine. At the end of the day, Casablanca, Slaying Lance, and Berkut Lance are still the better options for the enemy phase build. But if you are going to be running him in the player phase, then this is going to be a very powerful weapon. Mini Sturdy Impact is pretty nice because he does get the speed penalty, and this can be useful against extremely bulky foes that he cannot just take out with his Brave Lance. So if you do use Donnel as an enemy phase unit or as a mixed phase unit, then this weapon refine is going to be a disappointment, but if not, then there are definitely some builds which you could utilize with this new weapon refine. The first is the very budget build with Death Blow 3, Sturdy Blow just to pump up his attack for the player phase, and Dragback is already a pretty decent slot B skill, and Bonfire does work with his high defense. He can basically reach 40 defense with his weapon and Sturdy Blow. Another budget build is utilizing Fury and Brazen Attack defense, so you can fall into the Brazen Attack defense to get even more attack and defense for the Bonfire damage. And then we move on to some really expensive Donnel builds. So a lot of Donnel fans are definitely going to be interested in this. He can utilize Gale Force pretty well with this because this weapon does give him extra attack, which means that Heavy Blade is a much better seal to be utilized with this. So you could just run Death Blow 4, Lull Attack, and Time Pulse makes Gale Force into a 4-turn cooldown special at the start of every turn. So he can trigger Gale Force in just 2 hits and then attack another enemy. Similarly, you could use Heavy Blade 4 in the slot A to get some true damage, and just use Death Blow 3 in the Sacred Sea slot. And then we have got some high damaging builds in this build, which does give him a lot of Ignis damage. So you could run Heavy Blade and Special Spiral so that he can trigger Ignis on the second hit once Special Spiral is set up. So this can give him a lot of damage output. An attack defense push 4 is definitely a pretty expensive option, but it is something that could work out with him. And lull attack defense is always going to be a pretty nice slot B skill for him. You could also use him with Fury 4 and Brazen Attack Defense and Wrath. So all of these skills have pretty good synergy, and we've already seen the usage of Wrath and Time Pulse on someone like Sothis. So Bonfire becomes a one-turn cooldown special with this build, and Wrath can give him even more damage output on that. And then, of course, I cannot forget to mention the Braspiration meme build. But honestly, with the sturdy impact effect that he has got in his Weapon Refine, kind of makes it easy for you to get into the Brash Assault range. Even against units who might be very tanky axe units, because he does have high defense. So this could be used to make him fall into the Brash Assault Desperation range, and that can make him quad attack against any kind of melee foe, and then trigger Bonfire on the final hit of his Brave Lance. If you're thinking of ways of using the mini sturdy impact in his weapon, then you could also run him in Aether Raid's defense as a lunge rally trap unit. So this could be used in Anima season, where we do have Mirabilis, who is a flying dancer who could use guidance and basically make Donnel into a rally trap unit. And this allows him to just lunge the foes into the range of your team and then just gang up on them. And mini sturdy impact does help him because he is going to be pretty slow against many buffed up tanks and units. However, he can survive one hit many times because of his high HP and because of the fact that one Thracier and one Mirabilis do give him +5 defense and resistance, so something like this could be used in an infantry pulse team. And finally, we have got the speedy Donnel build. So if you want to use him as a quad attack unit, this could be done because he reaches 53 effective speed with this build unboosted. And of course, you could give him speed support from stuff like Speed Tactic. So if you have a +10 Donnel and if you have plus speed IV on him, then this is definitely something that is possible. Probably not the most optimal, but still an option nonetheless. Draug was actually a pretty popular unit when the game came out because he was the fast armor unit of Gen 1. But then as we got more armor units, he just fell into the shadows. But this Weapon Refine does bring some new life to him. And many people at that time did build him up as a +10 unit for arena usage. So Stalwart Sword gives him -6 attack debuff on the foe during the combat, and this is a fantastic primary effect because this is active against all kinds of foes, and this helps him against both physical and magical foes. And then the Weapon Refine effect is basically a carrot cudgel effect that we have seen on Spring Portrait. So if he's within 2 spaces of an ally, once again, which is pretty easy to do because he's an armor unit, it grants him +5 attack and defense during the combat and neutralizes any kind of penalties on his attack and defense. So he does have pretty high defense, and that can attract a lot of chill defense. So nullifying that kind of debuff is really good. So this is a pretty solid Weapon Refine that makes him extremely tanky on the defensive side, effectively giving him +11 defense, which is pretty insane. Now, unfortunately for many of his fans, they would have liked if this Weapon Refine did something with the speed stat because, as I said, Draug was known as the fast armor in Gen 1, and he still has workable speed stat even by today's standards. So something like Amelia's Weapon Refine that could work on his speed would have been pretty nice, but nonetheless, this effect is still solid. Let's start with some of the budget builds. So the first build is possible easily with Steady Stance and Quick Riposte, and you could also run double bonds with Attack Defense Bond and Vengeful Fighter. Vengeful Fighter is still kind of budget because you could get Male Grima Manual from the Divine Codes to just give him Vengeful Fighter with the Toilet Papers, and he can run Ignis with that. And now let's move on to some of the expensive builds because a lot of people did plus and merge him in Gen 1 in those good old days. So he could just function as a tank with Steady Stance 3, which gives him attack and defense, and also provides him with the guard effect, which is super useful. So he doesn't really need to run Special Fighter, he could just run Vengeful Fighter and have double Steady Stance for a lot of Ignis damage. You could also use him in Arena if you do use him as your scoring unit. And because of this Weapon Refine now, he doesn't really need any kind of 300 SP Slotsy skill, and now you could just run something like Armor March, and his HP is high enough to run Panic Ploy pretty easily, and that's a really useful skill in Arena where rallies are present everywhere. Any kind of tier 4 stand skill does go well for him in Arena. Now for the people who do build him up with a plus speed IV or in general prefer a speedy Draug, something like this could be run for enemy phase. Attack speed bond 4 gives him +7 attack and speed, and then steady posture can give him even more speed. So he ends up with 51 speed in the enemy phase, and this just makes him into this fast tank, which can definitely utilize this kind of fast build. And then we have got the ultimate speedy mixed phase build. So unironically, Wind Boost is actually a good option if you decide to go with the speed refine of Stalwart Sword. The reason being is that for the Speedy Draug fans, they would really prefer speed, so you could just refine it for the speed, and this gives you 2 extra HP. And Wind Boost does work in both phases, so he could function as a mixed phase unit and utilize this encounter much better. And he effectively has 32 resistance with his weapon's -6 attack debuff. So this is for the Speedy Draug fans. Even though he doesn't have any kind of speed effect in his weapon refine, you could still make a build like this. So that is going to be the batch for this month. In my opinion, Myrrh and Clarisse have got the best weapon refines out of this batch. I know a lot of people are going to get disappointed out of Donnel's weapon refine because Donnel can be a great enemy phase tank actually, but this weapon does nothing with that. So let me know in the comments which units you're going to be building out of this batch and which is your favorite weapon refine. I want to thank all of my YouTube members for their support, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment. And share this video with your friends who are big fans of any of these units, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because I wish YouTube sub boxes were about as good as Clarisse's weapon refine. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.